morning, everybody. Welcome to Scholar IAS Current Affairs classes. Today, we are going to look into January 12th current affairs. So, let's get into the issues. First issue is with respect to the inflation. Inflation is a very key topic in UPSC because UPSC has asked several questions on inflation. Literally, each and every year, we will see an inflation question in UPSC prelims. Also, it's a potential area in mains GS3 portion in economic development part. So coming to the topic, what is inflation? Inflation is nothing but a consistent increase in general price levels of goods and services in an economy over a period of time. So here if we look at the definition, three keywords are important. One is consistency, second increase in price levels, and third over a period of time. So just for 1 or 2 days, if the price levels are increasing in the economy, it cannot be considered as inflation. Also that without specifying a particular period of time, it also cannot be specified as an inflation. So inflation should accompany these three parameters, that is consistent increase in the price levels of goods and services in an economy over a particular period of time. So second, with respect to the money that we possess, intrinsically it doesn't have value. So the value that the money has depends on how much it can buy. For example, if you have a 500 rupees note, the value of the money is just the paper value. But this particular 500 rupees note can demand goods worth 500 rupees. So the value of the fiat currency that we possess depends on how much it can buy. So basically, what is the real problem with inflation is that inflation erodes the purchasing ability of the money. So for example, before inflation, let us take a pencil costs 10 rupees. So you can buy 50 pencils. After inflation, let's take if the pencil costs 25, you can only buy less than 50 pencils. So the value of the 500 rupees that you possess is reduced. It reduces the purchasing ability of the money. That is the value of the money. The intrinsic value of the money per se gets eroded by inflation. So inflation is measured by the inflation rate. So inflation rate is nothing but the calculation of inflation year on year and comparing it and expressing it in terms of percentage. For example, if India has 5% of inflation now, which means that this 5% is calculated having some base year in preceding. So basically, inflation is calculated using inflation rate. So what are the causes of inflation? Inflation is an interesting topic because we can look inflation in different angles. The first reason of inflation is demand pull inflation. This is a type of inflation where when the demand of certain goods is high, then the price levels of the particular good will increase. This results in overall increase in the price levels in the economy. So this is a kind of demand pull inflation. The next type of inflation is cost push inflation. When a product or service is produced, we apply factors of production like land, labor, machinery, capital. When the cost of these factors of production increases, naturally the price of the particular produce or the price of the service will also increase. So this variety of inflation is called cost push inflation. There is another third variety of inflation where when there is an increase in money supply, if money is spread across the economy and every person is having more money, as a result each and every person will demand more products, and this causes a kind of a demand push inflation. So increase in money supply increases the demand for products and as a result will increase the price of the product. This causes inflation. So there are three types of inflation: demand pull inflation, cost push inflation, and money supply oriented inflation. So the next question is whether inflation is per se bad or do we have something good in inflation? Basically, in an economy, there is always an incipient level of inflation, an incipient level of increase in prices. This minimal level of increase in prices is an indicator of a healthy economy. For example, let's say today you're buying a particular land parcel, and after a few years, let us say it is increasing, the value has been increased, which means that the economy has grown. One of the indicator of why the land value is increasing is because the overall economy has grown and more people are demanding more land. As a result, the price level is increasing. So this level of minimal rise in the increase in the prices of the economy denotes the growth of economy in the country. But when this particular inflation level is phenomenally high, then we call it as an inflation. So inflation is not per se bad. Inflation of up to 3% or below that could be considered healthy and is an indicator of growth of the economy. But other than that, generally, when inflation strikes at very high levels, then it erodes the value of money as we have discussed in the previous slide. And also that when you are going to a bank and access credit, or when you are depositing money in the bank and you are receiving 8% or 9% as the interest, when the inflation rate is 6 to 7%, then your effective real interest rate is only 2 to 3%. Basically, because the inflation consumes the value of the money that you have. As a result, the real interest rate will decrease. So, this is one bad effect of inflation. How inflation is controlled? There are a lot of ways to control inflation, but the primary task of controlling inflation goes with the RBI. Majoritarily, RBI focus on increasing the interest rate. When RBI increases the interest rate, the all other banks that are lending to the people will also increase the interest rate. As a result, lending from the banks to people reduces. As a result, the money transmission from the system to the people reduces. So, whatever money people have will be dearer in nature, resulting in decrease in price levels because people will have less money and they will demand less product. As a result, the price will come down. So, this is one technique with which RBI handles inflation. Second, when RBI focuses on increasing these reserve ratios, for example, there are certain reserve ratios which you had studied in the books, cash reserve ratio, statutory liquidity ratio. When these reserve ratios are increased, what happens? The bank's lending ability will decrease. For example, if the reserve ratio is 20%, after inflation, if RBI increases to 40%, then the banks can lend only remaining 60%. As a result, the lending capacity of the bank is reduced. When the lending capacity of the bank is reduced, the money from the system to the people is reduced, resulting in decrease in demand as well as resulting in decrease in price levels. So this is another way with which inflation can be controlled. Third way is by reducing the money supply, also we can reduce the inflation. Also that with respect to this increasing the interest rate and increasing the reserve ratios, indirectly you are reducing the money supply to the people. As a result, it contains inflation. Second important topic is with respect to foreign policy. This particular topic is important in GS to international relations. They could ask about the evaluation of foreign policy right now, how far it is successful, what are its failures, and how to improve it. All these questions could be asked in GS2. So, coming to the objectives of foreign policy, there are three basic objectives. One is to widen the sphere of influence. India has to widen its sphere of influence because it has to push forward its national interest in the international domain. We are now highly connected. It is a globalized world, and we need to have certain power to push forward the national interest and to gain out of global cooperation. Second, India will have an enhanced role in other nations with respect to other nations in terms of national interest as well as in global interest. For example, in climate change negotiations, India is supporting developing countries on their historic disadvantage it had suffered because of the West-led industrial growth and its consequence of global warming. So basically, these developing nations and the island nations have been supported by India in the international forum with respect to climate change. So this is the second point, which says that enhancing its role across nations. And third, India has to make it felt. India has to make its presence felt across the country. In terms of soft power, we are exporting Bollywood. We're exporting medicine facilities. We are providing proper medical care for the international meditourism tourists. So these particular things are very important, and the foreign policy is enabling us to provide these to the global community. So what are the foreign policy failures that we are experiencing right now? Of late, in the last decade, we had experimented with respect to different foreign policy ideas, with respect to different countries and different blocks. And right now we are experiencing certain shortcomings with respect to certain countries. One such country is China. We had bad experience with China in recent past with respect to Doklam and in Ladakh. So there is no significant breakthrough in Indo-Sino relationship. And in Afghanistan, the peace process have been hijacked by many countries like USA, Russia, China. Even Iran is having a say in Afghanistan's peace process, but India have been totally sidelined. This is basically because India had a dilemma of whether to engage Taliban in a formal way or an informal way. So basically, in Afghanistan, the peace process is not really led by India, and in fact, it has been sidelined. And the third, with respect to Pakistan, we are quite successful in charges against Pakistan of sponsoring terror. We had built a proper propaganda in the United Nations accusing Pakistan of sponsoring terror, and as a result, the FATF have increased the scrutiny over Pakistan and had set the timeline to reduce the terror activities. So, in this perspective, India was quite successful. But the repercussion of this particular policy is that the relation between Pakistan and India had further deteriorated, and we need to have a turnaround. And the fourth important country is Nepal. From 2014, we are not having proper relations with Nepal. We have a strained relationship, though we have roti-beti relationship from 1950s. The recent hyper-nationalist sentiments in Nepal has impeded the relationship between India and Nepal. The example being the Lipule Kalapani issue, where Nepal has marked these Kalapani into its own territory, and the parliament has also sanctioned it. So these particular issues is going on, and overall India-Nepal relations have also been strained. Despite that, certain countries like Bangladesh, Myanmar, and Sri Lanka, we had really helped out. We had reached them and provided proper support during COVID-19 crisis and in other times also. And the result, we are still we have to experience it. So, what are the reasons for these shortcomings that we are experiencing right now? First reason I would say is that India is suffering from the ideational vacuum. We really don't have a proper idea as to how to move in these testing times. Because right now the global competition is between China and US, and now it is kind of a second Cold War kind of thing that is going on. And hope that after the Trump's defeat in the US elections, we could really move towards again multilateralism in international fora instead of these bipolar tensions that we are having right now. So, in these testing times, India should have a clear policy or idea to deal with these two important powers. We really cannot support uh, one power unilaterally because that will have repercussions. So, we need to develop a balanced idea as to how to deal with these powers. So, ideational vacuum is one of the key problem that India is right now having, and this explains why we are having shortcomings with China as well as in several other domains. Second is the policy choices that India was making. Its tilt towards US has really weakened its link with Russia and Iran. As a result, Russia has moved a little bit closer with Pakistan and China. So naturally, the kind of a bipolar world is emerging. So we have to really contain it by again using our diplomatic skills to make friends with each and every country based on the interest and based on the national interest that we are having. Third key problem that we are facing is India has really moved away from non-alignment movement and SARC. At the same time, it should have strengthened the BIMSTEC, but that was not the case. BIMSTEC was not strengthened, and India was not having good relation in SARC also. And these are all having repercussions in India's international image as well as India's foreign policy. One more problem with respect to the foreign policy is that we had opted out of RCEP. Though it could be argued that RCEP, with India's withdrawal from RCEP, is good for India because the treaty per se acts against India. But alternatively, we should have had a good relation with Rick, but it was not the case. We did not have a good relation with Rick, or we did not have make effort to strengthen Rick. So all these things are the reasons why we are having shortcomings with respect to our foreign relationship with certain countries in the world. COVID vaccine and diplomacy is the third issue that we are going to look into. Relevance is in mains GS2 international relations. They could ask a question on this: how to increase our diplomatic power in the world by using COVID vaccine. So to understand this issue, we need to understand how much powerful India is with respect to vaccine. India is the world's largest vaccine producer. On top of that, one more key advantage is that we produce vaccines at lower cost. So these are the two big advantages that India is possessing so that we can use it in diplomacy to advance our national interest. So what are the opportunities? Though many vaccine products have been developed in Western countries and produced in Western countries, these vaccines are very high in terms of cost. So developing countries are looking towards India for low cost vaccine alternatives. So this is an opportunity to build a strong relationship with these countries so that this will be helpful in the future. Also that we can also use this COVID vaccine to strengthen the strained relationship with our neighbors like Nepal, like Pakistan. All these countries we could provide vaccine and develop goodwill gesture so that we could reverse the strained relationship with these countries. Also, India started commercial exports to Bangladesh, Saudi Arabia, and Morocco, and it has also promised to export to SARC neighbors. So this is a good opportunity to revive SARC. And in times where the Chinese expansionism is creating global tensions and many countries are facing the heat. On top of that, a key country which is countering Chinese expansionism is US. Now, US is also busy with its internal politics. As a result, India could take the center stage in countering this Chinese expansionism through its soft power diplomacy using COVID vaccine. COVID vaccine is not only diplomatically advantageous for us, but also that it could boost export and growth rate and helps in revival of our economy. So COVID-19 is both internally and externally is an advantageous aspect and we have to use it in a right way. In times of Chinese expansionism and a falling multilateralism, the global cooperation in COVID-19 vaccine development, as well as India's push towards low-cost vaccine for developing countries, could be an opportunity to rebuild India's image and power in international domain. So these are all the important issues with respect to January 12. For more videos and content, please visit scholar.com. Scholar.com also provides innovative content with respect to mains notes and prelims notes. Kindly subscribe to the channel in the YouTube. Also, kindly look into the notes that is provided in the website. Thank you.